Hello and welcome to the Albion Obsessed podcast. You join us on this live stream where we are going to be dissecting the Norwich game and the Ipswich game. We are live, so of course, please drop us your comments throughout this evening's broadcast. If you are watching after we've recorded it, drop your comments on the YouTube anyway, and we can have a lovely little chat. But before we dive into Norwich, which seems like forever ago now. Let's see who we've got on the show tonight. We welcome Joe. Joe, my friend, how are you?
Hello, sir. Yes, doing very well, thank you. We've won a Premier League football game. Wow. That felt different, celebrating that last night. But yeah, doing well, mate. How are you?
Yeah, man, I am grand. And it's amazing, isn't it, what a win does for your mental health. 2 wins on the bounce. I know obviously one was in the cup, which we will discuss as well as the Ipswich game, but 2 wins on the bounce, and I'm feeling fine. Dagan, it's nice to see you. Your beard's looking very sharp, my friend. How are you?
Maybe not as sharp as your mustache, Todd, but or your coif. This is hair. Look at that. No, I'm doing quite well. You were right. A win does good things for the spirit. So yeah, it's nice to be on the side of 3 points.
It really is. I think I said in our group chat earlier, it's amazing because we've all been grumbling over the last month, apart from Dagan, who never grumbles at anything because Dagan is the resident optimist. But it's amazing that grumble has changed from grumble to yes. And of course, yesterday's performance wasn't perfect, and we will dissect that in just a bit. But before we do that, I think it would be wrong not to chat a little bit about the Norwich game, Joe, because obviously lots of things happened in that game. We saw goals galore. We saw one goal in particular that we know we're going to talk about a bit more in depth because of who scored it. But the magic of the cup was alive and well, was it not, Joe? When we rocked up to face Norwich, the Shane Duffy derby, which I think it should now be known as. We went pretty strong, Joe, which was a really good indicator of how seriously Fabian Hürzeler is taking the cup. Do you think that was the best thing to do? I think many fans might say Europe is probably a stretch this season, so a cup run probably seems the best chance to earn ourselves some silverware.
Yeah. I think it's the Shane Duffy and Nick Stanley derby. Do you remember that set piece coach that we had once? Yeah, that was great. Almost the Ashley Barnes derby as well, but he left and he went back to Burnley, I think. But yes, always a good opportunity to get some sort of run, get some sort of confidence if you're playing against, no disrespect to Norwich. We know how tough the Championship is. We've been there for prolonged periods in our history. So we know that the FA Cup can cause upsets. So, it was a home game. It was a chance for them to take a Premier League scalp. And I think we dealt with it well. Went pretty strong. And I think that's what fans want at the moment, is to keep that momentum flowing throughout the squad, to have some belief that maybe one day that this club can lift a trophy, and to do that you have to field your strongest 11 throughout the competition, and to really challenge the establishment, as Fabian Hürzeler likes to say. So yeah, I mean, getting a cup would be wonderful. I'd take probably a Wembley final over European football this season, to be honest. It's a great day. We've had the semi-final. Why not go that one step further? But of course, we've got Chelsea next, so it's going to be tough. You've got to beat the big boys to challenge for it. So yeah, I think that's what we're going to do. It's at home, so it's a good chance to see some more players that, Solly March getting a few more minutes, hopefully Danny Welbeck. Get the rhythm back into these sort of tired old legs, and see where we can go.
Yeah, really well said there, Joe. I mean, Dagan, just on the strength of the side that we did put out, I was really surprised. I didn't think we'd go as strong as we did. I thought we might see, even on the bench, just a few more youth team products. But I think talking of another game in the FA Cup, if the Brentford-Argyle game taught us anything, is if you field a team of relative unknowns, you could see yourself dumped out of the competition. Of course, Plymouth Argyle beating Brentford 1-0. An upset could have gone Norwich's way, Dagan. Norwich looked pretty strong for the first 10, 15 minutes, if I remember correctly. But then pretty much Albion were in control. Ruta got a brace, 2 goals, well taken from him. A man on very good form at the moment.
Yeah, he's an exciting player. I keep hearing people talk about his ceiling being tremendously high, and I think he really is just scratching the surface. What's exciting is the thing he was seen as being weak in was finishing, and now he's finishing because he's a threat from all over. He drifts out wide. He's strong in possession. He holds the ball up well. Doesn't waste a whole lot either. I think wasteful possession of the ball is something we could be guilty of, but he tends to do something productive with it, which I like. I know I'm skipping ahead, but there really is only one event in this game that I think any of us want to talk about. And maybe I'm just queuing you up.
So let's talk about it then. Enciso managed to actually score a goal. I know what you really want to talk about, but I'm going to make you wait because we've got to talk about Enciso, because Julio Enciso, a man that is known to shoot thousands of times a game from all angles, from all distances, finally got a goal from a pretty improbable angle as well. I think we've got to give him that tip of the hat. Obviously, there's a lot of in the rumor mill at the moment about Enciso's future, whether he'll stay at the club, whether he could be going in January, be that on loan or permanent. There's reports out of South America that seem to suggest he wants out and that he's not getting on with Fabian Herzler. Obviously, take that with a mountain of salt. It's January. These sorts of rumors do fly around, and we can perhaps chat about him and what's best for him a bit later in the show. But it was, from my point of view at least, it was nice to see him on the score sheet. But yeah, okay, then fine. Let's move on to it. Joe, it seems only correct that we come to you on this one. Solly March, just how blooming wonderful was it to see Solly March on the score sheet? We talk about the magic of the FA Cup. And of all the events that happened over the FA Cup weekend, I think that's got to be up there with one of the best.
Yeah, I mean, what a moment for him. I mean, he had an opportunity against Brentford when he came on off the bench in the Premier League game to score. So it looked as though he was going to continue his vein and being someone that's going to try and take his chances and be effective for the team in terms of goals and assists. So after 14 months out, that's what you want to see. You wanted to see him come back in, hit the ground running. We've clearly let him come back in at the right time. I know fans have been saying, is he going to come back? Is he going to be the same player? But I think from the very small sample size of what we've seen from Solly March already is that he is going to still be a player that can be really effective for Fabian Herzler. He's very versatile. Came and played at right back in the Premier League, and then obviously gets his opportunity against Norwich to come on and get his goal. And Danny Welbeck sort of leaves it alone because he's offside. A lot of my friends who were at the game seemed to think that Solly March was offside as well, but I personally don't think he was. Reviewing the footage, Welbeck is clearly offside, but yeah, for him to leave that for Solly, and the reaction of the squad was just incredible. It's a guy that's been through a lot in terms of his career. He's had 2 very, very big, long injuries. So the fact that he's coming back from that strongly after 14 months is just absolutely fantastic, and it's a credit to him for having that mentality of wanting to come back and pull that shirt on again and put the ball in the back of the net in the fashion that he did as well. I mean, it was some finish. It wasn't just a sort of tap-in lucky goal. It was vintage Solly March. And yeah, let's hope that continues.
I love this comment from Adrian saying that he was in a financial aid presentation at his daughter's university visit, and he jumped out of his seat and fist bumped when Solly scored. I think I saw a lot of, I don't know if they were Norwich fans, because from what I can gather, at any rate. The reception from the Norwich fans to Brighton fans was very positive. And, you know, they were very glowing in their review of Brighton post-game. But a lot of people I saw on social media were sort of almost having a pop at how we celebrated that goal. Obviously, Jason Steele channeled his inner Matty Ryan as he ran the length of the pitch to celebrate. But I think maybe for outside fans who have not been aware of Solly's injury and his sort of like his potential, this could be it. What a big deal that is, Dagan. I mean, we've been on the podcast and we've sort of said, you know, with the sort of injury he is at his age, you know, it's a tough injury to come back from, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. No, I don't know that we're going to see the same player. I would still maintain that. But for him to have a moment in a cup match is tremendous. And it's a testimony to like why an athlete at that stage would continue to work so hard to try to find his way back. You know, anybody's ever been an athlete knows like we're all on a ticking clock and there's only a certain amount of time that you can be at the highest level. To suffer an injury and feel like a part of that time is taken away from you is tragic, right? But for a guy who's been at the club his entire career, you know, hometown boy, that was a special moment for the entire Albion fan base and certainly for Solly, and just it felt deserved, it felt like a reward. And seeing him back out the first time, I know I commented, you know, he looked off the pace, tracking back. There was one possession where he was tracking back in that first match that he played, and it was like, that is not the same pace that we would remember from Solly, who was pretty rapid. So the question is like, can he adapt to not being that same player, but still use his sort of herky-jerky shiftiness to create space? And we'll see. But it was great to see him have that moment, and it was, you know, the moment of the match. I feel like I don't remember anything else that happened in the game other than Solly scored a goal. And you guys know I'm not like the biggest Solly March fan, but you know, as an athlete, it means a lot to see a moment like that, and it brings your emotions out. I get a little teary.
Yeah, it's it was as you say, the magic of the cup, and just as a final point, really, I remember watching Solly March score in a pre-season game, probably when he was 18, 19 against Norwich, and it was an absolute thunder bastard. It was. I was
in the stadium.
It was beautiful, wasn't it? It was
against John Ruddy. It was, yeah. And he was like England number 3 goalkeeper at the time, and I know number 3 goalkeeper, whatever, but he was still a pretty decent keeper, and burst onto the scene, and I mean, what a finish!
Yeah, it was utterly ridiculous. So, I mean, I hope that's not a full circle moment, but it was one of those moments where, you know, sort of like having memories of that. It was such a well taken goal, and you know, I think as Michael have said in the comments there, you know, you've got to give props to Welbeck there. He's in an offside position. To have the sort of self-awareness to leave that for a player when you're a striker as well, when it's sort of like it's so ingrained in you to go for those opportunities, to leave that for Solly, to let him let rip. Was really nice. So yeah, you're right. That is the moment of the match. It's what we're all here for. It was a beautiful moment, as I say, like just magic of the FA Cup. So there you go, guys. The quick Norwich review, I suppose, to get us started. They say winning is a habit, and it was, you know, it was a nice way to start our week. We travelled to Ipswich last night to play the Tractor Boys, who have been doing relatively well over recent weeks. Really well, in fact. I think since a draw with Chelsea, they've not lost a game until last night. Got to see former Seagull Christian Walton, who, believe it or not, was once tipped to be our next number 1 if it had not been for an injury. During pre-season, it might have been him that got the gloves when it was Matty Ryan's decline and not Big Bob Sanchez. So it's just funny how life works out. But let's dive into it then, Joe. You know, right off the bat, first win in 9 was a huge moment for us last night. The starting 11 was Verbruggen, Veltman, Van Hecke, Webster, who captained the side, Purvis Estupiñán, Ayari, Baleba, Adingra, O'Reilly, MITOMA, and João Pedro. In regards to our starting 11 and how well we played against Norwich, were you surprised at all at any omissions? I mean, I was a little bit surprised to see Enciso after scoring a goal against Norwich. I was surprised to see him on the bench and Matt O'Reilly sort of in the 10 role. But apart from that, I was okay with the squad. Disappointed though not to see Gomez at least make the bench. But what did Joe Sayers think of our starting 11?
I think it's one of those things where, we played a FA Cup tie at the weekend. Then you've got a relatively quick turnaround of a Thursday night game with then a view of playing on Sunday, that we were always going to see some sort of rotation. People miss out. A lot of people talk about players being dropped. I see it as players being rotated. It's not anything personal. It's not a vendetta that Hertzler has, no matter how much the press are making it out to be that Fabian Hertzler hates Julio and Ciso. I just think it's because we've got a plethora of attacking talent that there's going to be competition, and it's where if Julio doesn't want to fight for his place and wants to be a first name on a team sheet, then yeah, you've got to go elsewhere. That's not going to be the case with Brighton. So yeah, but as you say, maybe a little bit surprising given that he did play so well against Norwich and got a goal. But then, as I say, like he could be on the starting 11 for the United game. So he's got to stick in, wait for his chance again, and take it again. Show the fans what you've been working towards, and show the fans that you do deserve to be the first name on the team sheet. Because I don't think we've seen that. Obviously, Tom Dagan, you know how I feel about Simon Adingra. I would have much preferred it to be either Rutter or Yankuba Minter there for sure. But hindsight's a great thing. Adingra probably has been better than what I give him credit for this season. He's got a few assists and goals, but he just frustrates the hell out of me. Tom, he really does. But yeah, exactly. So yeah, I wasn't unhappy with it. I was just sort of eager to see how it all played out, to be honest.
For the audio listeners' benefit, I think, Joe, you mentioned it before. Whenever Simon Adingra trips over his feet or puts in an awful pass or an awful cross, Joe and myself tend to post in our Albion Obsessed group chat the GIF of the wacky wailing inflatable tube man, because that's just what he reminds us of, those sort of wacky limbs. Dagan, in the last match, we saw Simon Adingra on the left, and he obviously scored a goal in our last Premier League game. I believe it was. Was it our last Premier League game? I can't even remember. But he's so much more dangerous from the left. Do you think that with Simon Adingra, it's just unfortunate timing for him that he's competing for a place with MITOMA, who's pretty much got that spot nailed down?
It is unfortunate for him that he is competing with MITOMA, who has that spot nailed down. Adingra, to your mention, is he's just better on the left. That's where he thrives. It's where he tends to score goals. It's where he can put in better crosses. He actually hits a really nice ball from that side. He sort of puts like the perfect amount of air on the cross from that side and often can find a target. It was the Villa game where he scored early. So I guess we played Arsenal in between there, but it was recent. Yeah, it's unfortunate. I think the question is just how much do we need or can we afford to rotate MITOMA to give him those opportunities? But at virtually no point has he looked good on the right. Like De Zerbi, Hurstler, like it just hasn't been good over there. And with all of the left-footed players we have that are options, it just, now that Solly's back, we have 4 guys that can play in that spot who are left-footed. It seems nonsensical to play him there, given that we don't have a lot of right-footed players. And MITOMA is just excellent, and it makes sense to to ride that horse while we have him, because he's incredible. But yeah, whether could they split games some? Just give MITOMA a little bit of rest, and Adingra maybe plays the first 45, MITOMA comes on, or vice versa. Like I could see that happening, but it's really a tough spot. And we've not really seen much of him centrally. Like I wonder if he could play behind the striker and do a job there. I think that's listed as a possible position for him, but I don't know that we've seen him play in that role. He's been primarily a winger for us. I wonder about his physicality in the center of the park and how he would hold up there. But yeah, not my favorite starting option. I was a little disappointed to not see one of the other attackers centrally instead of Ayari, and would have liked O'Reilly maybe to be the deeper sort of the 8 with Baleba 6, and then either Reuter playing centrally or Enciso, as you mentioned. Otherwise, the starting lineup I thought was what it had to be.
I think it's about as strong as we can go at the moment with the plethora of injuries. Just really quickly, I don't want to sort of prolong the point, and we can actually sort of get into sort of like the game itself. But just want to give him his kudos. Phil mentioned again in our group chat about playing players out of position, because there were times, Joe, in the first half especially, João Pedro just didn't look. I don't know if it's would say comfortable or suited to playing that 9. We know how effective João Pedro is up top when he's paired with someone like Danny Welbeck or Evan Ferguson, or even with Jorginho Ruta. I think, when he's got that other player who's an actual forward alongside him, he looks a lot better. Obviously, I don't want to, again, sort of like, stir the pot, as it were. Obviously, Evan Ferguson injured, even when he wasn't injured, not getting game time. Welbeck on the bench. Sort of Adingra again playing him on the right when we've got Minte on the bench. No Gruder. It's sort of playing players out of position to sort of get the team going. What do you make of that? Were there better options to make us more of an attacking threat, especially in the first half, where I think it's fair to say we looked a bit toothless?
I think, there's questions to be had sometimes, but I think my point from earlier stands that we've got 3 games in very quick turnaround, and that we do have to see some sort of rotation. And this is a very young squad, and we've spoken, Tom, at length in the group chat about how Premier League teams or just elite teams manage young sportsmen. You've got to do it in the right way. Obviously, we've seen Jack Hinshelwood out for a very long period, and everything like that. So for me, it's not a major issue. Obviously, the players that you mentioned have had their own injury issues as well. Obviously, Minter's been out for a little while as well, so we have to manage him as well. So I don't think there's any like glaringly obvious like omissions. I think it's just a case that we're having to just manage a very busy period coming out of January. A lot of players that are getting used to the thick and fast nature of English football. But I say English football as a whole because obviously we look at the Championship and they're playing Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday, Tuesday throughout the whole season. So it's a lot for these guys to manage, but we have to manage that in the right way. And I think Fabian Herzl is doing a pretty okay job of managing that. Obviously, we had a discussion, Tom, yesterday about when's the right time to bring Danny Welbeck in. So, it's just a huge balancing act that we probably us fans don't quite get the true like size of how much of a headache that is for Fabian Herzl and his coaching team. I think it's just one of those things where you just have to accept it because they need to manage it.
I think that's fair. And obviously we're don't know if you guys have seen it, we're top of the league when it comes to injuries. So that's fun. Dagan, first half then. I'm going to sum it up with a simple phrase. No, I'm not going to use that, actually. A friend of mine sent me a message the other week, actually. He's, just to give you context, he's a Crystal Palace supporter. I did whisper that. And he used a phrase, not a very nice phrase, but if you permit me the potential expletive, and I hope there are no children listening, it's all dick, no boner. Because it's very much in keeping with the sort of football we saw under Graham Potter. And it felt like Dagan in the first half. I know you're all very disappointed in me. I do apologise, and I did pre-warned you about the expletive.
You could have said it's all fart, no poo.
Well, that's not what he said to me, so I would feel like I was, yeah. But anyway, I digress. It felt like in that first half, Dagan, we had 162% possession, yet we did very little with it. And it was Ipswich that had all of the major opportunities, with Bart Verbruggen being drawn into some pretty decent saves.
We actually had 39% of the possession in the first half.
Really?
39%.
It felt like so much more.
No. Oh, wait. No. I'm looking at the wrong side. We had 61%. Sorry. I saw blue and thought Brighton. No, we had 61%. So, but that's not, by our standards, that's pretty normal. Although we have had less possession in some good games. The women just equalized. That's exciting. Thanks, Michael. Sorry. No, we had 61%. And yeah, I mean, but they had 4 shots. We had 4 shots. They had 3 on target. We had 2 on target. And I think one of those was like a dribbler that shouldn't have even been considered a shot. I think KAORU hit one like to the keeper that was like a slow roller, and that may have counted as a shot on target. It was not threatening. It was not very good. I think part of that is when we play Adingra on the right, we have no threat on that side whatsoever. And then, without João Pedro having that central partner, not that O'Reilly is ill-equipped for that role. I don't know that pairing as the central 2 attackers is the most potent we can put out there. Again, maybe okay if we have that attacking left-footed player out wide to open up more space centrally. But yeah, I'm somewhat unconvinced by KAORU as an attacking threat. And so I just think there just wasn't enough. We looked decidedly different as we brought on more attacking players in the second half. We looked much more potent. We looked like a completely different team. If I want to spin it positively, we did the job of staying in the game in the first half. We didn't lose the game in the first half. We maintained 0-0. And, sometimes you wait to bring on your subs and you think, hey, our subs are going to be way better than their subs. We are in that unique position now where it's okay to just stay attached, especially, away from home, and try to win the game late. You neutralize the crowd by preventing them from scoring, which I thought defensively we were good. They certainly didn't have any great chances. They had 0.14 XG in that first half. We had 0.26. So again, no one lighting the world on fire in attack. Michael likes.
It's interesting, Michael, because I've seen some really mixed reviews on KAORU. I've seen people slate him about yesterday's game, but I've also seen people waxing lyrical about him. And he's one of those players that he'll do something purely magical, and you'll be like, oh wow. And the next moment he'll just give the ball away from like under no pressure whatsoever. He is still very, very young. And I think he's just got a lot to learn. I do think the amount of minutes he's getting this season are in part due to a lot of the injuries to O'Reilly, Weifer, and Hinchelwood, but he's not doing terribly. I mean, I certainly wouldn't have banked on him getting this many minutes in the summer. But as I say, like he's just one of those players that sort of can do one thing brilliantly one moment and just make an absolute howler the next. Obviously, very important in the build up for our goal, which we'll talk about shortly, Joe. What have you made of Yasin Oyari, Joe? He's a bit inconsistent, which I suppose is to be expected of quite a young player.
Oh, yeah. As you guys have already alluded to, that he's just a very hot and cold player who just have moments. And I think I'm a very reactive, emotional fan. When I see a bad moment, it plays on me and it makes me really annoyed. And I'm like, yeah, he should be substituted. Get him gone. Put someone else in. Give them the opportunity. And that's my issue. I've made some reactive comments this season so far, and sometimes have come back to bite me in the arse. And I mean, my comments about Ayari, I didn't make any bad comments yesterday. I just said that I felt like he needed to come off. I felt like we needed something different. But in the second half, he completely proved me wrong. He was involved in both of the goals. So I think for me anyway, it's proven to me that I just need to be patient with these young players, that they are going to have moments in games where they don't make the right decision, but they'll get the opportunity through Fabian Hertzler to go and make that decision again and make the right decision. And he did that. So, yeah, I think it's a lesson to everyone, especially me, that patience is needed, and that he's a very young player, as you said, Tom. So he's not going to be a polished diamond. Everyone expects him to be, because this is Brighton and we only find diamonds in the rough. But sometimes the diamonds are still a little bit rough and we need to smooth it out.
Agreed. Now, you know what? I was actually going to make a very similar point. I think we have a history of making young players look really good. I mean, I could rattle off, I'm sure we all could rattle off loads of players that are young and looked absolutely brilliant. So perhaps when he's playing against or playing alongside Baleba, who's currently being touted by Glenn Murray as better than Basuma and Caicedo, you know, it seems a bit sort of, why is he so inconsistent? But Baleba is still really inconsistent. I mean, he still gave the ball away quite a few times yesterday. He's very good at winning it back. But he does still make a lot of errors. Sometimes with Baleba, he looks like everything's just a bit too easy. And then he'll do something really daft, and then he'll go and win it back. And you think, oh, phew. But yeah, I think with Ayari, it's just patience. And whatever Herzler said to him at halftime seems to have worked, because his second half was much more positive than the first. But I think that's the same of the whole team. I just want to give a quick nod here to two of our defenders, Veltman and Webster, who I think both played really well yesterday. I can't remember which one of them it was putting that crunching tackle on Delap quite early on. And obviously Delap's, a tank of a human being. And one of them, and Dagan's trying to figure out which one it was, put in this absolutely crunching...
It was Webster.
Was it Webster? He just put in this absolutely thumping tackle against him. And I was like, that's a really good way to introduce a young striker and saying, this is what you're up against tonight, lad. So Webster is, I was really impressed with him yesterday. Slightly concerned, as I always am with Adam Webster, that, one moment he'll look like an absolute Rolls Royce, and then the next moment similar to Ayari, he'll just drop an absolute clanger in there. And also with his injury record as well, I'm just always very sort of whenever he gets started. But no, I thought him and Veltman yesterday were absolutely excellent. And as Dagan said, they gave us the basis to build upon. So in the second half, when we did make those subs, we had a nice clean sheet to protect. Yes, Dagan.
We all came into this game, I think, a bit worried about Delap. Like, if we were going to be hurt, it was going to be him. If you'll recall the first game against them, he almost hit a screamer that would have won the game late. That tackle from Webster. You had a tackle on him late from Veltman. I think that's why I was starting to remember. They both had separate, just kind of crunching tackles where they won the ball first. And then there was a moment where Delap got called for the foul. He went up in the air, and he just tried to go through Van Hecke, knock Van Hecke to the ground. And Van Hecke got up, and there was this moment. But Van Hecke was very animated. I don't know if you guys saw this on TV over there. But it was a very much a, like, who the blank are you from Van Hecke? And he just looked like he was going to swallow Delap whole. And it was it was a palpable moment where you could just feel like Van Hecke's like, I am not to be trifled with, young fella. And he's just growing into that role of just indomitable spirit that you just can't help but like. The game that he played with the head wrap was at the Brentford game, just looking like a maniac out there. Like, yeah, he just, yes, both of those other two guys were sensational. We've come to expect Van Hecke is just going to be excellent all the time. But I thought he was really a standout as well. And really, they performed as a back three. Purvis certainly had a similarly up and down game. He made some really nice recoveries, but he also gave the ball away in ways that were just mind-boggling. but I felt like our other three defensive players were really solid in all phases.
Yeah, 100%. I think those three deserve a really good shout out. As I've almost come to expect when watching Brighton play under Fabian Hürzeler, no 45 minutes are ever the same. As toothless as we were in the first half, we looked so much better in the second. But Joe, I do want we have to talk about it because I've seen quite a lot of people chatting about it on socials. Before any goals were scored, there was a big coming together between João Pedro and Christian Walton. João Pedro trying to chase the ball down, and I suppose as many strikers would, makes that sort of that jump into the air to try and block any sort of goalkeeper, pass out from the back if it goes up in the air. The two collide and he gets a yellow card. I've seen a lot on social media about whether that should have been a red card. A lot of people saying that if it had been given as a red, they could totally understand why. A lot of people kind of like arguing the point, yeah, it's only a yellow, it's football, it's it's going to be combative. But this is the second time in several weeks we've seen João Pedro do something a bit risque. Of course, he threw that elbow a couple of weeks ago, and now he's absolutely battered Christian Walton. Do you think Hürzeler needs to have a little whisper in his ear and just be like, tone it down a little bit, mate?
He's not a brute. He's just misunderstood, Tom. No. I mean, yeah, the Brentford one we've spoken about, and for my opinion, he was extremely frustrated, and he was showing the ref what the Brentford player was doing to him, and there was a camera angle that looked horrific, but there was also a camera angle that showed that he definitely wasn't trying to smack the Brentford player in the temple to knock him out. So I think people need to calm down a little bit. I mean, this Ipswich one, no, just no. It's not a red card. He's running full pelt already towards Walton. The ball's rolling towards Walton in a way that maybe he would anticipate that Walton would kick it out or go down to claim it. So what João Pedro's doing is either jumping to make a block and try and intercept the ball and score, or he's anticipating that he's going to need to jump over Christian Walton. That hasn't happened. Walton stood his ground. João Pedro's gone into him at 50 miles an hour. Not a red card. There's no malice in it whatsoever. There's no intent. He was anticipating. He anticipated wrong. It's a yellow card. Fine, whatever. Move on. No way in hell is that a red card.
Okay, fair enough. What do you think, Dagan? Just to get the full sway on the thing.
I thought a yellow was fair. If it wouldn't have shocked me if they'd given a red. I would have said it was unlucky, but the game is open to interpretation. Was it reckless? I think you could make a case that it was reckless, like relative to his chance to win the ball, relative to his chance to do a lot of damage to the player on the other side. Like, I've seen red card tackles that looked less reckless get a red. The fact that it was to the head also, to me, maybe changes the calculus, but I thought it was going to be a yellow. It stayed a yellow. I thought it was the right decision. But again, if it had gone the other way, I'd have been disappointed, obviously, because we'd be missing João Pedro for a time for sure, and may not have won that game. But yeah, I think they got it right.
Yeah, I think, as you say, Dagan, it's open to interpretation, and I think that's probably why the discussion is happening. Yeah, I think for me, it's the jump. And I do totally understand why he jumps, totally get it. But I think if he doesn't jump, maybe the collision's not as bad, and therefore it looks different, and therefore, yeah. So, yeah, it's one of those where if it had been given as a red, I probably wouldn't have too many complaints. But as like you, Dagan, I think a yellow is also a fair sort of assessment of it. So yeah, I just think second time in 3 weeks, yeah, that's the bit that makes me slightly a little bit uncomfortable about it. But yeah, it's aggression is part of the game. It's a physical sport. It's a contact sport.
Yeah.
And I don't want João Pedro to not be aggressive because I want him to want to win the ball. So
and he has that same swagger, right? I mean, he he is the other end of the guy he's pounding his chest. I've talked about it a number of times, and that's who he is. And he's fearless. And I think we're better for having guys like that in the squad. So a little lucky, but play hard, get after it. Yeah.
Well, love that. Right, guys, let's talk about the goals then. So we see the first goal. Was it Veltman that puts the ball into the channel, and then the Ipswich man just sort of dangles a foot up in the air and it comes off him, and then we see, and this is where Ayari does really well in my opinion, as does Matt O'Reilly, because both of them make the right call. And I know it's easy to say that sort of with the benefit of hindsight, but Ayari cuts it back to O'Reilly, who I thought was going to have a pop, but he didn't, and he squares it to MITOMA, and his shot isn't the best, and it does squirm under Walton. But Joe, I don't care, because we scored a goal against Ipswich, which is something we didn't do at home. And it also gets Mitoma on the score sheet. And in doing so, he equals Shinji Okazaki's record for goals scored in the Premier League by Japanese players. A much welcomed goal, which sort of like really sort of put our second half dominance into perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I don't care how it goes in. Glenn Murray scored with his penis once, so we'll take it. This podcast is just,
Dagan's like, there are far too many penis references in this podcast in my liking.
Well, he scored with it, so as I say, I don't care how it goes over that white line. If it goes over the white line, whatever, great, fantastic. I mean, yeah, if you don't shoot, you don't score, and that's what we saw with KAORU, that he's getting on the end of it. He's not been in the goals as much as people expect, and I think people define KAORU by goal scoring, which I don't think should happen. I think KAORU has been a very effective player for us this season. The way he progresses us forward, the way he draws defenders, the way he creates opportunities for other players is just incredible. That's what KAORU Mitoma is about. He's a creator. He's the danger man, and that doesn't always have to lead to goals. So it's credit to him that he's gotten to that milestone of equaling, and I'm sure he's going to beat it this season. I hope, if he can keep getting into positions like that, he will. And yeah, it was brilliant from Ayari, brilliant from O'Reilly. When Phil put in that the goal had been scored, I was about 10 seconds behind on my stream, and I thought it was going to be O'Reilly to sort of curl it in past Walton. But yeah, great for Mitoma to get that confidence ahead of this weekend, and hopefully he can cause more havoc for Manchester United.
Yeah, let's certainly hope so. Rodders, we're all thinking the same thing. Where is Dagan's crazy hair? But doesn't he look handsome? I mean, he looked handsome before. I'm not trying to say that Dagan is defined by the length of his beard, but he looks dashing. Dagan, I mean, I want to play a little bit of devil's advocate. I don't want to seem like a gloomy Gus, but Walton really should have saved that. He'll be very disappointed.
There was a lot of traffic. Like I just question like what he could see and when he could see it, and it was deflected a bit too. Yeah, I don't know. That wasn't one that I thought you'd necessarily, I'm sure, I guess if you're an Ipswich fan, you'd want better, and perhaps we would too if that was Bart. But I mean, in Bart, we have a world-class international starter keeper. Walton, sure, he's fine, but he's not that, right? So the expectations maybe are a little different, at least for me. I thought it was a fine goal. And again, he's probably anticipating that O'Reilly's going to shoot. Like that extra pass probably wrong-footed him to some degree. I don't think we all thought O'Reilly was going to shoot. I'm sure countless people were yelling, shoot. Given our propensity to not shoot sometimes when there's a perfectly good reason to, an opportunity to. Yeah, I didn't feel bad about it at all.
That's absolutely fine. I mean, I don't feel bad about it either. I'm glad it went in. I just want to play a bit of devil's advocate because I think, as you say, like and you're probably right, Dagan, it is probably because of perspective. And obviously with Bart, he probably is, he's an international goalkeeper, the Dutch #1. My expectations of him would have been to have saved that. But that's because perhaps my expectations are a bit higher of Bart than perhaps would be of Christian Walton.
I mean, that one bouncing save that Bart made was ridiculous because that ball took a wicked hop for him to catch it with one hand, center of the ball, cleared it way out too. Bart is exceptional.
Bart is one of those players, and you can see why he's being touted for some of the European giants because he's just absolutely phenomenal. Has a ricket in him, but he's still young. Mitoma, as I say, he's equaled Shinji Okazaki's record of goals scored by Japanese players in the Premier League. I think, Joe, this is a nice time to just sort of think about Mitoma and his impact on the football that we've been playing since he joined us, his impact on the Premier League. What's been your favourite Mitoma moment?
I mean, first of all, I think he's easily one of the best players I've ever seen put on an Albion shirt. I mean, for what he's done for the club on the pitch and the fan base he brings with the Japanese contingent that come to the Amex, and the way that he's grown us globally is been incredible. Probably through no massive thinking by himself, just the fact that Japanese culture comes with so much loyalty, and that they wanted the club to go out there and everything like that. I mean, there's so many KAORU Mitoma moments, obviously being so influential in getting us into European football. That first season, I mean, it was, again, what have we discovered here? £2.5 million from the Japanese league, and he's come in and had he went out on loan to USG, didn't he, and came back. I mean, we shared our first moment of seeing KAORU Mitoma together, Tom, at the Newcastle game, and we were like, "Who is this guy?" And yeah, he was a player.
That's probably my favourite Mitoma moment. It sounds really daft because it wasn't a goal, it wasn't an assist. It was when he came on in that game against Newcastle, and he was up against Trippier, and he was only on the pitch for about 10 minutes, and he just made Trippier look absolutely basic.
Yeah,
and it was just that moment of, wow, what have we got here? Because this is different. So for me, that's probably my favourite Mitoma moment. That first real, oh wow, and that was from a 10-minute late substitution.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to pick one moment, I think it would be the Liverpool FA Cup goal. I was in. Sorry, Dagan. I was in the West Upper for that game, and I saw that ball come across, and it felt like time stood still. And I mean, I was terrified to celebrate because I was in the upper tier, and I thought I was gonna fall down onto the pitch and end up in the bundle with the Brighton players. But it's just incredible, and I think it defines KAORU Mitoma, just clutch moments and the player that's gonna win you games. And he done it many times that season. He's done it many times afterwards. So yeah, long live KAORU. Sorry, Dagan, you have to choose another moment now.
No, I'm gonna still choose that moment. I'll never forget it. That extra touch up in the air, Trent Alexander-Arnold going to all fours, and him finishing off Liverpool in the 92nd minute and the call was outstanding. Just sort of screaming Mitoma. Yeah, for me, that is the correct answer. It's maybe not his most fantastic play, but just the context of all of it, for me, made it extra special and emblematic of sort of his creativity and what he's capable of and the quick thinking. And again, doing it, I mean, probably wouldn't say Trent is the best defender in the world. He's a talent for many other reasons. But just to put him completely at a loss on the ground, touching, literally all four on the floor, was just comical. And a huge moment. And the celebration, right? He's like flying to the side. Yes, all of it. Great. Yeah, vintage Mitoma.
There was also that moment about, was it against Bournemouth, where the Bournemouth player is literally on his knees in front of KAORU MITOMA, and there's that still image of KAORU MITOMA dribbling into the box, and the Bournemouth player is literally on his knees. I'm sure it was against Bournemouth. I mean, I know that's just a still image, but that image is just images that go hard. You know?
I mean, he tormented Wan-Bissaka one game, I remember, where it was just like he was, a spinning top. The run against Wolves where he went through, their entire defense to score. I mean, he's an iconic player who produces iconic moments, puts on a dribbling clinic every time out. Every time he touches it, you feel like something absolutely electric could happen. And you really can count on, maybe one hand, two hands, the number of guys in the Premier League where you would say that about. And it's really special to have one of those players and have him with the club for as long as he's been with the club. And, he's one who, knock on all the wood, hasn't been linked away. And you wonder, could he be a lifer for Brighton? And, maybe so.
And did you know, Tom, he done his thesis on dribbling and he attached a camera to himself. No, sorry. I won't.
Next, you're going to be telling me that Fabian Herzler's in his early 30s, Joe. Sensational from KAORU. And as you say, Dagan, he's just one of those players that as soon as he's on the ball, you just feel like anything could happen. Another player that's joined our club relatively recently that seems to sort of, anytime he touches the ball, something can happen. That's Georginio Ruta. Ruta, obviously, as I said at the top of the show, scored 2 goals against Norwich, and he followed that up with a really, really nice shot on the turn to double Albion's advantage. It wasn't the best free kick in the world from Yasin Ayari, but Ipswich, lovely. Ipswich don't deal with Ayari's pretty poor free kick. And as I say, it's an absolutely lovely shot on the turn, Dagan. And, we did have to wait some time for the VAR. Dunk apparently seeing if he was offside, which he wasn't. And the look on Georginio Ruta's face when it was given was certainly a moment. Georginio Ruta, Dagan, flying in form at the moment. He's just been an absolutely fantastic signing.
Yeah, right. I mean, the question was, did we pay too much for 40 million? And now it feels like, did we get a bargain? It's great to have the options. He's got good size. He's quick, strong, really strong. I think deceptively strong. I thought he had backheeled that goal at first glance. And I know at least somebody else in the stateside Seagulls chat had asked the same question. And my response was, yes, he did. And then I saw the replay. I was like, oh, no, he actually didn't. But how he got the ball into that position and got the shot away very quickly showed a lot of skill, especially with his weak foot. I think it was a right-footed shot. He's an exciting player. He's a huge talent. I think he's just scratching the surface of what he can do as a goal scorer and as a creator. And it's nice that he, seems like he can play, at a minimum in 3 of the attacking spots, which is nice to have a piece that's that versatile. So, highest, most expensive ever signing for Brighton so far.
And he looks blooming wonderful, and he saw out the game for us.
He does seem delightful.
He's just got a very expressive face, hasn't he? He's got a really expressive face. And I tell you what, I find him a really endearing person. Obviously, I don't know the bloke from Adam, right. But just every time he's in like the tunnel cam or whenever you see pictures or videos of like what they're doing at training, he just seems like a real character.
Yeah.
He's just very endearing, isn't it? Really
endearing. Baleba's sort of cut from that same cloth too. Both those guys are always bouncing around and seem to be grabbing someone and just being like jocular and good natured, which is it's fun. You need guys like that in the locker room for sure.
Yeah, you do. I think it takes all sorts to make a locker room. We've talked about like needing of leaders, but you also need those ones that are a bit more lighthearted, because they're going to help get you through the tough times as well. So as we sort of round off, I suppose the Ipswich game, I'm going to do something slightly different. So normally I would ask you for a player of the match, but instead I'm going to ask you to single out just one player, and you can't pick the same as somebody else. I want you to pick out one player for good or bad or both. So yeah, I'm going to come to you first, Joe. Pick one player for us then that you'd like to talk about that you noticed doing something either really amazing or really bad.
Okay. Who do I choose? I am going to mention Adam Bloody Webster. I'm sorry, Tom. I'm sorry, but I have to mention him. I mean, you know, I've written him off. People have written him off. People saying he's not good enough anymore. People are saying that he's too injury prone. He's drops too many clangers. But when he's been called upon now, oh my goodness me. He came on against Arsenal. He was flawless. Absolutely fantastic. A leader against Norwich. And yesterday was just captain again. Brilliant. Deserves it so much because, you know, we speak about how much of a nice guy he is and whether that was enough to keep him around. But if he can carry on taking his opportunity like this, then absolutely he's worth keeping around. People are saying that he should be going to Preston North End, he should be going to the Championship, League One, and stuff like that. It's just completely and utterly disrespectful. We've seen the player that Adam Webster can be. Yes, the mistakes that he makes are detrimental because he's a defender. There's been other defenders that have made terrible mistakes, and we're not sending them to League Two. So, you know, I think he deserves all of the credit in the world because he's been really, really good for us when we've really needed someone to be as strong as he's been. So yeah, Adam Webster, fair play.
Yeah, agreed. And for the audio listeners, I was making lots of hand signals there, going, I was going to choose Adam Webster because yeah, Adam Webster, yeah, played really, really well yesterday, and hopefully you can get what I tend to just really quickly about Adam Webster. He tends to do better when he's got a string of games, like most players, you know, a string of games under his belt. I think the worst thing that could happen now is if, unless he's injured, he gets dropped for Lewis Dunk. I think Webster needs to keep his place in the squad all the time he's playing well, because that's just going to make him better and better and better. And I think it should only be injury that dislodges him and Van Hecker, because we saw what happened when Dunk came in for Igor. And I wasn't a big fan of that. Dagan, who is your player that you'd like to single out?
You were going to pick Webster, and I'm sensing that you'll probably go to Veltman. So I'm going to leave Veltman for you. No, okay, well, maybe not. That was just my guess. We just didn't talk a whole lot about this player. And so I want to talk about him for that reason, because I think he's our most important player, and that's Carlos Baleba. Every time that we looked vulnerable, under threat, he just is everywhere. He is omnipresent, indefatigable, right? We could list the big words to describe but he's just our most valuable. He's our most important. He makes us look so much better than we are when we make mistakes, when we give the ball away cheaply and the other team is going the other direction. When he's not out there, those are goals so often. And when he is, he just goes and wins the ball. We gave the ball away carelessly in our own end 3 or 4 times, and Baleba was there to win the ball back instantly to save us from giving away a good chance. We've come to expect it because it's just what he does. So if he doesn't do anything spectacular, we don't take note of his game. But I think it's a very different game if you take him off the pitch, any game out. And so, for me, he's the player that deserves mention, and I want to talk about, because I think I said earlier in the chat, and I realize not everybody's going to read this. I think if he fulfills his potential, wherever he ends up fulfilling that potential, I think people may say he's the most talented player to ever wear a Brighton shirt, because he is just an unbelievable athlete. And, his sensibilities, his ability to turn and go, he's fun to watch. He's a fun personality, but he makes us so much better and so much less vulnerable than we'd be otherwise. So, Carlos Baleba, I love you.
I think, yeah, very good shout. And as I say, as I said earlier, Glenn Murray has been very complimentary of Carlos, saying that he could go on to become even better than Yves Bissouma and Moises Caicedo. High praise indeed, considering Caicedo, well, when he was with us, was genuinely exceptional. Yeah, who am I going to pick? So I wasn't going to go with Veltman. I bloody love Joel Veltman. He's just, he really just, you know what? I'm going to go for Veltman. I was going to go with Ayari, but I feel like I've already spoken quite a lot about Yasin Ayari, and I think, you know, so I've already said my piece on him. So I am going to go with Joel Veltman. I think it was Curtis in the chat earlier said, Joel Veltman has stolen my heart. You know, people often say that Pascal Gross was the single best buy Brighton have ever done because of his cost, which was what, 1 million, around that sort of marker. 3 million. Oh, okay, fair enough. But yeah, so cheap player, came in, brilliant. Obviously, goals and assists galore. Joel Veltman cost under 1 million, famously. And he is just so good. When we've got Joel Veltman on the pitch, I just feel so much more relaxed defensively. He is a master of the dark arts, and I think sometimes that's what you need. We have for years been a team that are very, very nice. We're very nice, and we've lacked players that do that sort of, well, they do the things that Joel Veltman does that wind up the opposition. I've never seen so much hate for a Brighton player as I have for Joel Veltman over the last couple of weeks. It has been exceptional. And he just gets Brighton, doesn't he? You know, he came to the standoff full, premiere. He says he wants to stay at the club. His contract ends at the end of this season, but he's got an extension. He says he wants to stay. Ajax are apparently sniffing around. They want him back. He's just brilliant. And they often say that when players are out, no player is as good as they are when they're out injured, because obviously fans lament them not being there. And that happened when Joel Veltman was absent, and he comes back and he puts in performance after performance. And we, over the last couple of weeks, we've talked about Tariq Lamptey and how good he's been. But as I say, I love Lamptey as a wing back, but Veltman as a sort of as a right back, centre back, that helps us transition into a back three. It's just, yeah, he's just blooming exceptional.
Tom, do you remember when Graham Potter played Veltman at left back?
I do, because apparently Joel Veltman said he's just as good at left back as he is at right back. He was not. But to be fair, he also played Jakob Moder at left wing back. So, you know, less said about that, the better. I do want to talk about him in a moment, actually. But no, yeah, my pick was just Veltman, just because he's just brilliant. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And I really, really hope he stays at the club another year. 33, I think he turned the other day. But, you know, there were just moments on that pitch yesterday where you could see all that age and wisdom, and, you know, knowing when to draw fouls and knowing when to, you know, put in a tackle. Just, yeah, exceptional professionalism from him. Really good. We talk about this season, we've talked about game management a lot. Joel Veltman's game management is generally superb. So yeah, that he gets my sort of my shout out today. So as we sort of draw towards the end of the show, just want to talk a little bit about January, as we are in the height of transfer season. And one player that we saw yesterday on the pitch, actually, Joe, that could have been his last time, as apparently he's close to a deal to join Feyenoord, and that's Jakob Moder. Jakob, he's been a good servant to the club. Unfortunately, had a horrendous injury, which he's never really turned. He's not been able to come back from that, has he? I think the writing was on the wall for him last season when he returned from his injury, where we were clearly missing some physicality in the middle of the pitch, and he just wasn't getting the minutes. It looks like his time with the club might soon be done.
Yeah, just really sad when that sort of thing happens, because when he came to the club, everyone was, you know, so excited to see what he could bring. And I remember a game, I think it was against Manchester City, and he just looked that physical midfielder that was just going to have people bounce off him and keep the ball, progress forward. That injury came at a really horrible moment. And he's had to react to that. He's had to deal with a lot of harsh things. He's dealt with 3 managers now at Brighton, that maybe he's just not sort of put his stamp on what I can do. Like, this is what I can do, play me, because he's just never had that run in the team. And maybe he's been a victim of not being loaned out to get that rhythm back, and it's just come to a point now where we're having to make a decision, and that unfortunately he is going to be one of those players that's going to go, to free up a few wages, get a transfer fee back for him, and I hope he can kick on again in a league where it's not as crazily demanding. I mean, the Dutch league is definitely improving for sure. So I think he would be a really good signing for Feyenoord. And it keeps that sort of relationship sweet between us and Feyenoord as well. So yeah, it would be a positive move, I think. And I hope he goes on to revitalize his career and be the player that he can be, and, stay at a level where he can keep playing for Poland as well, because I'm sure that's probably one of the proudest things in his life, that he can represent his country. So good luck to him, and I really hope he does well.
I think that's probably one of the driving factors in, one of the many driving factors, I'm sure, in him wanting to leave the club. Playing international football is obviously a big driving factor for many players. And he's not the only one who potentially risks losing out on their place internationally if he doesn't play. Dagan, I think with Jakob Moder, he's an incredibly versatile player, has and can play pretty much anywhere, maybe a victim of the increase in substitutions that we're now allowed to see in the Premier League. But yeah, it just hasn't worked out for him since Graham Potter left.
Yeah, I think you're right. He is a bit of a jack of all trades, master of none guy. And I think we're in an era where specialists are at a premium. And I think, while we have some versatile pieces in the squad, KAORU and O'Reilly, for whatever reason, Motor maybe just doesn't bring that one strength that's enough to knock someone else out of a spot. Unfortunate. He's a big guy. You'd like to see that he could impose his will, but it's interesting. He's not particularly a physical player. And I think that was maybe the allure is, okay, this guy's humongous and he's pretty fast and he does a lot of things well. And just all the pieces. And again, I did not know him as a player before his injury, so I don't have a sense of what he offered there. But from what I've seen in his time post-injury, he just has not looked elite in any respect. And that's, may he go and find his footing and tear up the Dutch league or wherever he lands. Because as everyone's saying, he's always seemed to be, a good servant to the club.
Yeah, fair. And like I say there, Joe, about international players sort of wanting an opportunity to shine at a club level to help them stay in the international squad, and 2 transfer rumblings that just don't seem to want to quit at the moment are that of Evan Ferguson and Julio Enciso. I'm getting quite bored with these 2 myself. Evan Ferguson's, been sort of touted here, there, and everywhere across the Premier League. Injured, and Enciso's agent, I think it's his agent, has been talking to South American media about wanting to move. Because we've already sort of talked about Ferguson and Enciso, Joe, I'm just going to keep this brief for you. I'd like to get Dagan's thought on this in a bit more depth, because he didn't get to tell me what he thinks last week. But Joe, for you, do you just want these things done and dusted so we can move on?
Yeah, I mean, something I did hear in the week was that a lot of the Enciso talk is maybe a ploy to be trying to get him a better contract. So maybe he feels like all of these transfers have come in and maybe there are more money. Diego Gomez has come in. He wants that little bit more stability to be there and play with his best mate at a Premier League club. So it wouldn't surprise me if we see a new deal for Julio and Enciso after all of this. It seems to be something that tends to happen quite a lot. So it'll be interesting. I mean, the Evan Ferguson thing, as I said last week, Tom, that for me is a no runner. He needs to stay. We need to be patient with him. He's very young, and he needs to be in that team. But obviously, it just depends on whether he's an option for Fabian Hertzler, whether Hertzler wants to play him. Which, if Fabian Hertzler doesn't want to play him, that would just be incredibly baffling, considering how Evan Ferguson burst onto the scene and the ceiling that he's got. So, yeah, for me, has to stay.
I'm going to make a comment, Dagan, just before you talk about both Enciso and Ferguson, and this might give you a bit of fuel for your comment. I think, and I said it last week, I think Evan Ferguson needs to go out on loan. I think he needs to go on loan to the Championship. I think the Premier League is too intense for him. I think he's inconsistent, and the fact that he's, even when fit, has been on the bench, and Pedro, who I would argue isn't an out-and-out proper number 9, is being picked ahead of him. For me, that speaks volumes. I think because he came onto the scene, scored a lot of goals, scored the hat-trick against Newcastle, we're thinking he's Premier League ready. I think he's too inconsistent. I think he will build consistency in the Championship. So, and I'm okay with people to disagree with me, but just Michael, I see your comment there about Delap. Delap spent last season on loan at Hull, who were chasing promotion and just missed out on the playoffs, I believe. So Delap cut his teeth in the Championship. We've seen it before, players playing at a level down to sort of regain their confidence and, to pay their dues, I suppose. So that's my opinion on it. I think Ferguson should go on loan to the Championship, and whether that means that we need to bring someone else in, which would be highly unlikely, I know, perhaps. But yeah, Dagan, that's my 2 cents on it. So just an extra fuel to the fire.
I don't have a hugely negative reaction to that, but I do think we need somebody else to have as a striker depth option that we currently don't have in house. And if we see that as one of the guys we loaned out, like maybe we think Osman in a pinch could be that other guy. I don't know. I don't think we will sell him unless we get a real premium for him in January. I do think he's ready. I really feel like the onslaught of injuries has just robbed him of form. He's just had not a consistent run. When he was getting a consistent run as an 18-year-old, he looked like an absolute monster, a monster. So that same player is in there. I think his confidence is probably a little shaky. To your point, I think he would probably go and run roughshod through, the Championship. But it's a physical league. But he is an elite finisher. Like, he has a knack for scoring goals when given opportunities. He, like João Pedro, struggles when not paired with someone who can give him an adequate amount of service in the box. Like, that's just like, he needs to be the guy receiving. He is not a creator, and doesn't excel in that role. And so, but we saw the numbers even last year when people talked about he wasn't that good. When paired with João Pedro, both of their numbers were excellent, and rivaled any scoring duo in the Premier League. We just didn't see a lot of it from De Zerbi. He chose to not pair them together. So I'm not convinced that he's not ready. I'm also not convinced that he wouldn't benefit from what you suggested. The difficulty is it's going to be hard for him to find a run of time to find his form in this team, unless he's healthy and Welbeck suffers another injury, which is possible.
Yeah, I was about to say, which is quite, very likely, given Welbeck's injury record.
Yeah. And again, it certainly if two of Ruder, João Pedro, and Welbeck get hurt at the same time, which again, given our injury run, is not impossible. I certainly hope that doesn't happen. But yeah, I would be surprised by a move if we don't get at least 50 or 60 million for him. I just feel like we'd be selling him below his value unless he's just throwing a fit. And if he is, then loan him. So.
I think it's January as well. So I think anything we see in January is automatically going to be bumped up a little bit because of the knock-on effect. And of course, it's not late January, but it's obviously the 17th today. So, the time it's going to take for the club to then bring someone else in. The transfer rumor mill has sort of been quite quiet this January, which I'm not adverse to. It seems to be more rumored outs than ins. But with this Ferguson one, as I say, for me, it's just about getting him back and playing with a smile on his face. I just think whenever he has come off the bench, and I do agree that he's he's obviously an immensely talented individual, and obviously for him, he has been hindered by Danny Welbeck's form, because obviously Welbeck started the season like a house on fire. But for me, he's just got to find his love again and find his groove. And I just think loaning him out to another Premier League team with perhaps the increase in expectation and physicality and the speed of which the Premier League's going to play, I don't know if that's necessarily going to help him get back to what he needs. Sometimes, as I say, play a level down, score a hatful, regain your confidence, come back in the summer, and be ready to be our main striker. But yeah, there's a lot of moving cogs, shall we say? So yeah, that's I know I said all that last week, but as it continues to rumble on, I'm continued to be sort of a bit like, no, just loan the lad out to Plymouth Argyle or somewhere, because I like Plymouth Argyle. I don't think he would go to Plymouth Argyle. They're rock bottom of the Championship. But no, yeah, I think going to like a team that are in the playoffs or towards the top would be a good shout for him. But that's just my 2 cents. As we round off the show then, gents, couple of things. Chelsea in the FA Cup next for us, which is going to be fun. But before we venture all the way to that game, we've got the small matter of Manchester United at the weekend. Old Trafford has been a happy hunting ground in relatively recent times, but there's a particular German who loved scoring at Old Trafford who's no longer with us, but I'm sure we can make amends, Joe, and we can make Pascal happy from afar. Just thoughts ahead of Manchester United, Joe. Manchester United are a bit all over the shop since Ruben Amorim came in. They've had a real mixed bag of results for a lot of the game yesterday against Southampton. They were behind, obviously went on to win that game. But yeah, they're a bit iffy form-wise.
Yeah, I said as much on my Twitter yesterday. That paper's over the cracks at Manchester United. I think the feeling in amongst that squad is nothing but really negative. They've got obviously Amad Diallo, who's been fantastic this season, played really well at the Amex in the reverse fixture earlier on, and is certainly a danger man. But I really feel like if we can cope with him, we can cope with Manchester United. I really think that win for them yesterday has papered over a lot of cracks, because until they scored, they looked absolutely hopeless. And their fans are not in a great way at the moment. I mean, look at where they are in the Premier League. As Manchester United, you wouldn't expect them to be there at this point of the year. So let's hope we can compile that misery. And I think we've got the talent to do it. And I'm actually feeling probably as confident as I felt about a game going into this one, is more so than I was against Ipswich. So, I mean, that goes to prove what Manchester United are at the moment. So, yeah, looking forward to it. And I think we can score goals against them. I think if MITOMA's on form, if we can get Rutter in the side from the start, pair him with João Pedro, get Yankuba Minter back in there, just run at them, cause some problems, because they crack so easily. So, yeah, I think we'll be all right. I think we'll get a win. So, if you're asking for a prediction, Tom, I think I'll go for a 2-0 win for the Albion.
I will certainly take it. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? You say about like being more confident to play Manchester United than Ipswich, and I don't know if that's an actual about Manchester United at all. I think that's just Brighton to a T. Dagan, I've long since been calling for Fabian Herzler to adopt his St. Pauli tactics, 3-4-3. And he's very set. He came in and he said he was going to slowly sort of transition the team to his way of playing. And I think that's a sensible thing. As impatient as I am to see the 3-4-3 or whatever, St. Pauli ball at Brighton has been, I think adopting the more patient approach has certainly been beneficial to our squad. The same cannot be said of Amorim, who came in and changed the squad from the Ten Hag way of playing to my way of playing straight off the bat. And I think it's fair to say that Manchester United are struggling with that. Do you think Amorim has tried to do too much too soon? And do you feel like this is a great opportunity to put Manchester United to the sword?
I mean, they're a Jekyll and Hyde outfit right now. I think that's the product of trying to work in new ideas. They're not bad ideas. They're just the players are not yet all the way wedded to the system. I think Herzl's approach is a little more conservative, and I think it's served us well and is a reason why we've been so hard to beat, despite not being able to secure a lot of wins ourselves. Yeah, I think this is a game where who scores first matters, despite their ability to come from behind that they've shown and our ability to lose a lead that we've shown. I feel like momentum will be important in this one. And if we can strike first, we could maybe even run away from them because I think we could open them up. I fear that they will still put goals in. I'm going to call 3-1 to the Albion though in this one. I think we'll find a little more of our attack. I think we'll see one of our best attacking lineups in this game. And maybe a 1-0 at halftime and then, a second and give back one and make us all terrified. And then we score a third. Yeah, I don't know. I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited about this run. I want to remind everybody, we've talked about our run. We've only lost 2 in the last 12 in all competitions. We've only lost 2 in the last 12. I know wins are at a premium. You want those 3 points, but for a manager of this age to go on through 21 Premier League matches and to have only lost 4 speaks volumes about how competitive we've been in every match. We have not been a team that's been dominated very often. And so that gives me a lot of hope going to this next stretch where, there's no one I look at and think, boy, I don't know how we could ever beat them. Right? We do have back-to-back matches against Chelsea, which is the one team that actually handled us a little bit. I want to go back to something about this match, if I can, because I forgot to mention it, and it's worth mentioning. And it's something that I see as a real strength under Herzler. It's come out a number of times. We sometimes look our best when we don't have a lot of the ball, when we let our opponents have more of the ball because our counter press is so effective. And I think what we saw in the second half was we just choked the life out of them whenever we did give them the ball deep at the other end. What do you think our possession was in the second half? What was our possession percentage in the second half?
So first half was what you said, 61%
61%.
Second half, I'm going to go with low 40s.
I will say 46.
You hit it on the nail, Joe. 46% possession. They had 54% possession and only 1 shot, no shots on target. In our 46%, we had 7 shots and 3 on target, 2 goals. It's just interesting, right? It's a different way of playing that we're seeing. And I just want to emphasize there's been so much talk of this manager doesn't have any tactics. And I think that's not the case. He changes tactics from game to game and within games in a way that I think is alarming and unsettling to some people. But there's just no way you could put out a team that is the 5th or 6th least expensive team in the Premier League and play against the teams in the Premier League and only lose 4 times if your manager was incompetent. It just doesn't make sense. So please, please, please keep your faith in the manager. He is not incompetent. He does have tactics. He just doesn't employ the same ones every game like De Zerbi, which we saw also doesn't work as we got throttled all spring.
I think that's the thing, Dagan. I think going from someone who is so this is the way, this is the only way and we've seen how we saw in De Zerbi how as soon as teams figured us out, if we had one or two injuries, we couldn't do anything. We've seen with Pep Guardiola, who is many people's like greatest of all time. You know, he is a tactical genius. There's no way around it. But we have seen even with his sort of like rigid structures of this is my way of playing, that it's not working. And I'm just going to bring this back to a comment that Rodgers has made about certain systems not working in the Premier League. Rodgers has said 3-4-3 does not work in the Premier League. I'm not necessarily sure I agree with that. Antonio Conte won the Premier League with a 3-4-3, did he not? But I totally understand. I think that someone like Arne Slot's come in, and I know it's Liverpool, but the tactics that Liverpool are utilising and the flexibility that they have, I think we see similar with Brighton. And it was this great word, I think it was in the Dogma article, situationalism. It's about adapting your tactics to what is on the pitch, which is why we often see 45 minutes that are completely different, because Herzler will adapt on the fly. And I think it shows adaptability, and that's what you want with your coach. You don't want a rigid sort of this is the way, this is the only way, and that's it. But it does mean from perhaps a perspective as a fan, you sometimes look at the football and you sort of think, what am I watching? But I do think it's hindered slightly because of what we had before, if that makes sense. We had Graham Potter with a very sort of clear, I'm going to play a back three. We're going to keep the ball at all costs. We won't have many shots, but we'll keep the ball. And then you've got De Zerbi, who's bait the press, create transitions. It was very clear what their tactics were, whereas Fabian Herzler changes so often. It's, again, that word situationalism is just, I think, best defined.
And I think we have to then give grace to the players that are adapting all the time as well, and learning, because, they're not the finished article at all. They're not tactical geniuses. They're players who are adapting and improving their own game, as well as trying to learn what the manager is trying to tell them mid-game or mid-half. And it's really hard for them to do. But I think that's why, again, I'm trying to teach myself patience, is because I think if we are patient and we believe that this is, again, a project with a young manager and a young team, that we will start to see a really good side again. And I don't think it's going to take nearly as long as what it took Graham Potter, because Fabian Hertz has taken over from a team that were just dumped out of Europe by Roma. He didn't take over a Chris Hughton side who only just stayed in the Premier League. I think give us this season. I think this is a test season. If we don't achieve something this season, I don't think it's the end of the world at all. We go again next year. We get some players back healthy, Igor, Kadioglu, people like that who are said to be out for a long time, and go again, because we love this club and we'll be there no matter what. So,
Tom, I'm going to say it though. We're 6 points out of fifth. We're 6 points out of fifth. We're right in the mix.
Where would we be, Dagan, if we hadn't capitulated to Leicester and Wolves?
We'd be 4 points better, and that would be nice. We'd be, and honestly though, positionally, we'd only be 8th, I think. Or no, maybe 7th. Depends on goal differential with Villa. Because they're at 35 as well. So, I mean, Bournemouth has to play Newcastle this weekend. So if they don't get points from that and we manage to get 3, that potentially puts us ahead of them, depending upon goal differential. I think they've got us by 4 right now, but if we win and they get a thumping from Newcastle, which the way Newcastle's in form could happen. But yeah, we're hanging around. We just have to keep doing what we've just done, which is win football matches. We've got this one, then we've got Everton home, Forest away, then the Chelsea Cup, then Chelsea, home Chelsea in the Cup, home Chelsea. And then I think it's another stretch of, what we would say are winnable games. I think we play Saints in there, and but they're all, the thing is, they're all winnable games. Liverpool is the only team I look at right now and think that's going to be a tough ask, but every other game feels like a game we could win.
It's funny, isn't it? Because you mentioned Liverpool, and that first 45 minutes at Liverpool was probably the best 45 minutes we've played all season, and we didn't win. So yeah, it's funny how you look at it. And I always see games against the likes of Manchester United and Liverpool as more winnable than Southampton.
What a time to be an Albion fan. Right?
What a time to be an Albion fan. But that wraps it up, guys. We've hit the 90-minute mark. Thank you for joining us on this live edition of the Albion Obsessed podcast. If you are watching at a later date, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content. If you haven't done so already, drop some comments. Let us know what you think about the Norwich game, what you made of Solly March's goal and his comeback. Of course, let us know what you thought about the Ipswich game as well, and what you make of the transfer talk. But thank you to Joe and Dagan for joining me this evening. And thank you to our viewers as well. Your viewing and your support and your comments are always very much appreciated. So wherever you may be, whenever you may be, we'll see you again next time. Take care, guys. Mind how you